Pest control is an important part of building maintenance. And it's not as easy as just going from apartment to apartment and spraying. That's because apartments offer easy access for food, water, and shelter for pests. And if they feel threatened, they can easily move from apartment to apartment. If you're unlucky enough to have a tenant who's a hoarder or has a hygiene problem and attracts pests, no amount of spraying is going to eliminate that problem. And worse, it's going to spread from apartment to apartment. So that's why pest control is such a difficult problem to deal with for building owners. This video is for building owners to inform them how to eliminate pest infestations or how to deal with them once they start. We're going to give you 4 important steps that you can take to prevent pest infestations or how to deal with them once they start. So you're not going to want to miss this. Topics of this video include, number 1, tenant education. Here we're going to discuss what actions we want the tenants to take to be able to prevent pest infestation. So we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty of what they actually need to do and how are we going to communicate what they need to do to them. Number 2 has to do with your staff, what they need to do, because they have a lot of control over pest infestations with keeping the interiors and exterior of the building clean. And most of that focus is really on controlling the garbage and the compactor rooms, but of course also the common areas and then the areas that they work in. Number 3 is about the IPM method. The IPM method is a method that pest control companies use, and this is the standard for pest control. Then number 4 is going to be about the actual pest control company when they come over to do your work, what kind of methods they should be using, and how often they should be spraying. So then let's get started with number 1, which is tenant education. And here we're going to talk about what actions we want the tenants to take and how we're going to communicate those actions to the tenants. I'm certain that you've seen all kinds of tenants. For the most part, you're going to get tenants who are clean, who take pride in their apartments. Then you're going to get the ones in the middle. And then every now and then, you're going to get this nightmare where you have a tenant who is a hoarder, who doesn't take care of hygiene. It really only takes one tenant to create a problem for an entire building. And then you get a tenant like this, and the pests will just travel from his apartment or her apartment to the apartment next door and next door. I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, what can I possibly do as a landlord or as a building manager to control what happens in somebody's apartment? And of course, it's the landlord, it's the building owner that gets regulated, that gets the violations when other tenants complain. And this tenant does not get regulated and does not get violations. And to be able to deal with this problem takes a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of resources. So you're not alone. Building owners that we manage their buildings for, deal with it. And my advice is very simple. You cannot control everything. But what you can control, you really have to pay attention to. And that's what this whole video series is that we're doing about building maintenance. Are we going to just wait for a pest infestation and then react? No. We're going to be proactive. We're going to pay attention. We're going to take the steps necessary to minimize this issue. And maybe we can even prevent the whole issue altogether. To do that, you have to educate tenants to do their part. Now, one of the best sources of information on pest control that I've seen is from the New York City Department of Health. They have a 1-page document titled Pest Management Tips for Building Residents. I'm going to leave the link for this document in the video description below. So now, if you're the kind of landlord who sends out rent invoices every month by mail, you can stuff this document into the envelope and send it off. Or let's say if you use a property management application, a lot of these property management applications have portals where the tenants can look to get information, or they have other ways to communicate to the tenants. You should be able to put this information in there and have it available for the tenants as well. Not just passively, but to push it out to them. And also, let's say if there's a building-wide notice that you have to send out. Let's say there's work on the boiler and there's no water for an hour. Along with that email, at the end, you could also just put some talking points about pest control in there as well. Of course, you can put posters up in the common areas to highlight what they need to do. If you're in the building and you bump into a tenant, why not have a conversation about pest control? And most importantly is this. Talk to your building staff. Get them up to speed about actions that they need to take, that people need to take for pest control, and make sure that they know about it and they talk to the tenants about it. Now, is this guaranteed to work with a tenant that is a hoarder and has a hygiene problem? Maybe, maybe not. But for a lot of the other tenants who are clean, who are organized, it may just give them a few extra tips and best practices to do even better than they're doing and to improve on the way that they keep their apartments clean and organized. To get rid of pests and keep them from coming back, you need to deprive them of everything they need to survive: food, water, shelter, a way to get around from apartment to apartment. You can accomplish this by doing the following. Wash dishes after using them. Do not leave dirty dishes laying around, even if they are in the sink. Wipe counters, tables, and other surfaces after every meal to make sure there's no food stains or food left behind. Remove clutter to get rid of hiding places for pests. Be careful when coming home from trips or welcoming secondhand furniture inside. Used items can house insects. Promptly bag and remove trash. The goal here is to dispose of garbage without offering pests access to what they can eat. Vacuum floors regularly. Do not leave pet food, or any food for that matter, out overnight. The building staff can do a lot to prevent and control infestations in the building common areas. And actually, they're really at the front line of where the issues sometimes can start. And think about it. Why is that? Because a lot of the building maintenance rooms are in the basement or the entryways where pests can access the building and use those rooms to spread into the rest of the building and into the apartments eventually. Some of these rooms are the storage rooms, compactor rooms, mechanical rooms, electrical rooms, boiler rooms, gas and electric meter rooms, broom closets, and workrooms for maintenance employees where, they can eat lunch or they store their stuff during the day when they're working. Could you ever imagine that there's so many rooms, so many maintenance rooms in a building? But the three rooms that are most at risk and that you really have to keep an eye on are the garbage storage area, the compactor room, and the chute maintenance. The garbage storage area is actually not always a room, but sometimes it's on the outside of the building. And the chute maintenance room is where all the garbage comes in from the tenants that they throw down the chute on each floor. And by the way, those rooms, the chute rooms on each floor, also have to be really kept clean because they can get dirty pretty quickly. The area where you store your garbage, which is different for different buildings. Some of them have a specific room for that. Some of them keep it on the outside against the building wall. When it comes to garbage containers, only use tight-fitting lids. Now, I've seen so many products for garbage containers. There's a lot of good ones. But the key really is you want to keep everything closed off and prevent access so that rodents, especially rats, that's where they really focus in that area. So you want to make it as inaccessible as possible to get to the garbage. So you want to place the garbage at least 6 inches off the floor and away from the walls. Now, buildings should have the capacity to store 3 days of garbage between pickups. There might be a snow day. There might be some reason why maybe there's a government holiday. So you have to make sure that that you can store garbage for a couple of days. Now, you want to wash the garbage store areas on a regular basis to prevent grease buildup, as this has the potential to attract pests, obviously. So the building staff is going to be spending a significant amount of time in that area to keep it clean, to make sure everything's closed off, to make sure that everything is disposed of in a way to make it as difficult as possible for cockroaches, mice, rats to get to the garbage. When it comes to collection time, you want to do that at the last possible minute, or as close to it as possible. It is recommended to do so during the morning of sanitation pickup instead of the previous night. Longer wait times equate to longer feeding periods for pests. This will attract pests to the building. The longer you leave the garbage out on the sidewalk in front of your building, the more time that the rats, mice, and cockroaches have to get to it, because they're there in higher numbers. And then once they know that that's the general area where there's a lot of garbage, they'll be more attracted to your building, and you don't want that. So put out the garbage closer to the pickup time. Now, before we move on, let's just turn to the compactor room. The compactor room is just like any other garbage storage area, is a perfect breeding ground for pests. If you just have one bag open with food items, that can feed hundreds of unwelcome pests. So what we have to do is wash the compactor rooms to prevent grease buildup. And then also in the garbage chute dumpster, you want to make sure that that area is clean as well as the rooms that contain the chutes on each floor. Finally, pay attention to your sidewalk as well. Make sure that's always clean and grease-free. So as a building owner, it's to your benefit to keep an eye open for any entry points from which pests can come into your building, and to make sure that your building staff does the same. Now, there's certain tools that we use to close these entry points, and that's what I'm going to show you. I'm going to give you some examples of where to look, what to look for, and how to pest-proof these openings. Okay, so here's my first example. This is just your regular run-of-the-mill cast iron radiator. As you can see, there's a portion of it that's going into the ground. Sometimes it comes in from the wall. And then there could be a gap where it's going into the ground. And that gap, of course, should be closed off, because that's a way that little creatures like cockroaches can come in from. So what we do is you can either put in a copper wool around the gap, which is really doesn't look that great. Another way, I guess, could be to put an escutcheon plate on it. That looks like a lot nicer, and it has a cleaner look. Here's another example of anything that causes a wall penetration. That could be plumbing, it could be a pipe, or it could be an electrician running their electrical through the wall, or it could be the cable guy coming and putting the cable through the wall. Actually, the other day, a cable guy came in, he ran a cable from one room to another. There was a gap that was open, and he didn't bother to seal it up and close it. So you have to pay attention to things like that. So you could, if it's a big gap, you can use a backer rod to close it up, or you can use a sealant. There's different ways of closing it up, but just make sure that it gets closed up. Here's another example. This is a picture of an exterior vent. And as you can see, there's a hole in the screen. So if there's a hole in the screen, or there's a missing screen, then you want to make sure you cover that up. You could use something like galvanized mesh to put on top of it to close it up. Here's an example of an exterior entry door. And what you want to check for is the gaps underneath. You don't want big gaps underneath the door where pests can easily enter the building. So a good thing to do is put in a door sweep for all the exterior entry doors. So in this picture, you can see how the vegetation around this building is totally out of control. So you never want to have weeds, grass, flowers, or trees, or anything grow, or even shrubs grow too close to a building, because these types of vegetations can serve as a harborage and can attract many different kinds of pests, like cockroaches, for example. Use these to hide in these dense beds of vegetation, and then they slowly make their way into the structure. What is IPM? IPM stands for Integrated Pest Management. Whereas in the past, pest control companies would come and just spray frequently with pesticides, with this method, companies are looking to get at the root problem instead of just the symptoms. And a lot of that has to do with what we've already discussed, pest proofing your buildings. When you're looking for a pest control company, a lot of them will already advertise that they use IPM. Now, so much of what we're discussing is how we shouldn't just react to problems when it comes to building maintenance, but get in front of the problem. And so please also take a look at our video on roofing and facades. Some of the methods your pest control company should be using are bait stations, specifically tamper-resistant stations. And the reason that they're tamper-resistant is because we want to protect children that are in the area and pets. So what happens is the pest control company comes there, they put the bait in the tamper-resistant station, and then they have a key that they lock the bait station with, so that no children or pets can get it anywhere near it. These stations are placed along the walls and along the fences because the rodents like to walk along the walls to feel safe. Mice and rats really love dark and closed spaces, so that's why they're attracted into these bait stations. So you wouldn't want to put this like in an open area in the middle of, let's say, a playground or field. It has to be along the walls. Another method that pest control companies will use are roach bait gels, and they also have these for ant bait gels. And basically these are odorless and they're not volatile, and the gel will not produce airborne particles. What happens is the pest control company will come into the apartment for the tenant, and they'll apply the gel behind appliances like the fridge, the dishwasher, the ovens, and inside drawers and cupboards along the edges and crevices. And then they'll put it under the sink where the piping goes into the wall. Or, for example, they might put it where roaches have been seen before. One time I saw an infestation in an apartment. It was in a cupboard in the kitchen. And that's where the tenant had been storing different kinds of marmalades. The cockroaches were very attracted to that that sweetness. The way that it works is that the cockroach goes in, it will eat the bait gel, which it's attracted to the taste. It will get it all over its body and its feet especially. When it goes back to the colony or the nest, it'll spread that gel everywhere. Other roaches will eat it and get poisoned, as well as when this cockroach dies, since cockroaches are cannibalistic, the other cockroaches will eat it and will get poisoned that way as well. So that's how the poison spreads. I've seen this method used before on a couple of occasions, and I'm always amazed at how well and quickly it actually works. Another method that pest control companies use is dust and granular bait. An example of this is boric acid. So what happens is that the cockroach goes into the dust, and when it grooms itself, it ingests a dose of poison because it's basically eating the dust off its legs or its antenna. So what the pest control companies do is they can come into the apartment and they go inside the electrical outlet and they put some of the dust in there. In order to do that, they'd have to remove the faceplate. They go where the pipes go into the wall underneath the sink, for example, and they go under or behind cabinets. A good place to put these dusts and granular baits is any place where you wouldn't put a bait gel, and any place that's inaccessible for children or your pets. And this can be a very effective way of dealing with cockroaches as well. Okay, so lastly, what's not effective and what should you never use? You should never use illegal pesticides like Trespassitos, Chinese chalk, or Tempo. You should never ever use products without labels. That's very dangerous. You should never use foggers or bombs. Never place loose bait in areas accessible to children or pets. We've already spoken to that. You put them in the bait station. How often should an apartment be treated? That depends on how bad the pest infestation is. If it's very bad, the apartment would benefit from having a treatment once a month, but this should be short-term, no longer than 6 months in total. But the important thing to remember is that when you're applying pesticides, this is not something that you do on a regular basis for the entire building. It's something that you do when there's actually a problem. Just one last thing I want to mention before I let you go. If you found this video helpful, please give us a like, leave us a comment, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. We are Premises Guardian, a property management company based in New York. We can help you manage your buildings with less violations, more satisfied tenants, and to maximize profitability, which is something that we aim to do and have done for many of our clients. If you want to find out more about us, please click on the link in the video description below. That will take you to a page on our website where you can schedule a call with one of our team members and find out more about us. In the meantime, best of luck managing your properties, and I hope this video was helpful to you.